I have two hearts in my chest, one of a scientist and one of an entrepreneur. Teaching values and helping the next generation to be a nicer and better researcher, human being, and create an impact, that's the best thing you can do as a scientist and as a human being.
Hello there, I'm Sarah McCluskey, and this is Research Adjacent. Each episode, I talk to amazing research-adjacent professionals about what they do and why it makes a difference. Keep listening to find out why we think the research-adjacent space is where the real magic happens. Welcome, and thanks for lending me your ears for another episode of Research Adjacent. Today, the research adjacent in question is Christian Tidona. Christian is a serial biotechnology entrepreneur who currently owns and runs the BioMedX Institute in Heidelberg in Germany. This unique independent facility brings together the brightest academic and industrial minds to find creative real-world solutions to big health problems. Christian is the managing director, a role that he rather magically describes as being a guardian of time. You'll have to listen on to hear what he means by that. We also talk about why he started his first company straight after completing his PhD, what he's learned along the way, and why both mentors and mentoring are so important to him. If you like this episode and would like to hear more entrepreneurial stories, go and check out Academic Adventures, a podcast series that I helped to create all about academics who also run businesses. I'll put a link in the show notes, but for now, here is Christian's story. Welcome to the podcast, Christian. Thank you so much for coming along today to join us. I wonder if we could begin our conversation by hearing a little bit about what it is that you do.
Thanks for having me, Sarah. Yeah, in a nutshell, what I'm doing is I'm trying to bridge the gap between academic research and industry. So what we're trying to do with my BioMedX Institute is to help convert this creativity and knowledge that is being produced in biomedical research in universities and help translate it into something that will ultimately help a patient.
Yeah, really valuable place to sit there, because certainly the people I've spoken to, that bridging that gap can be a bit of a challenge sometimes, can't it? So tell us a bit more about your role within the company.
Yeah, well, I have two hearts in my chest, one of a scientist and one of an entrepreneur. And I actually did my PhD in this beautiful city of Heidelberg, Germany, where I'm still based, and did my PhD in virology and in the late 90s, and then found that the university is not for me. And I started a company, a diagnostics company at the time. And then after a while, didn't go too well, the first one. Then I started another one and moved my way towards a situation where ultimately in 2013, I started my own biomedical research institute called BioMedX, of which I'm still the owner and managing director, and with a long-term perspective of building something that creates impact. And that's still what I'm doing today, helping this to organically grow this institute with its values and its impact in Heidelberg, and meanwhile also in other places like the United States and Israel.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, so you've said a little bit there about the company. Maybe we can hear a little bit more about that. So you've said you're not just based in Germany. I'm guessing that's where you started, in Germany, but you've now grown.
Right. Yeah, we started BioMedX a little more than 10 years ago on the campus of the University of Heidelberg, which is one of the oldest universities in Europe, the oldest in Germany, and with a very large biomedical research campus. And on this campus, we started with a lab space in the technology park with framework agreements with major institutions in Heidelberg, because we're working very closely at this interface between academia and industry. So for us, it's very important to have a vibrant academic environment. And we built it from there. So at the moment, it's roughly 75 people in Heidelberg. We have, since last year, we have a new site, which is built very similarly close to the campus of Yale University in New Haven, Connecticut, in the US. And also we're part of a consortium that operates a startup, a venture studio, close to the Weizmann Institute in Israel, in Rehovot.
Yeah, fantastic. So it sounds like it's been a real journey, a real growth there to reach the point you're at now. So you've said it's a biomedical company. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about the kinds of research that you're involved with.
Yes. Yeah, it's based on a completely novel model how to bridge this gap between academic research and industry. And the way it works is that most of my time I spend with researchers in big pharmaceutical companies and help these researchers to ask very big future questions, for which there's currently no solution, neither in academia nor in startups. And once we identify such big questions, we call them challenges. We publish them on our crowdsourcing platform worldwide at the best universities and research institutions and invite early career academic researchers to apply by submitting online a very original project proposal how to solve this particular problem. And usually we get between 200 and 300 proposals from 60, 70, 80 countries. So it's truly global.
Yeah.
And then we select the 15 brightest individuals and we fly them in for a 5-day bootcamp to our site where they meet each other for the first time. We help them to associate in 5 different groups, and we help them to combine this collection of academic ideas into something we'd call a truly brilliant project proposal, which they present on the last day of the bootcamp in front of the jury, which includes the sponsoring pharmaceutical company. And then once we agree on a winner, this winner is then moved with his or her family to our site. We organize visa, jobs for their spouses, new homes, kindergarten spots, school, whatever they need. And then they live and work for up to 5 years in our institute on the campus of the University of Heidelberg to implement their research, very close mentorship from mentors from academia and industry. And usually such a project has a research budget of roughly 1 million euros per year. So for 5 years, that's up to 5 million. And at the end, the pharmaceutical company has an option to internalize the results and then turn it into something that will help patients.
Yeah.
And that's the main concept. And we've grown from a few projects and until now, the last 11 years in Heidelberg, we've started 22 such research groups. So Big Pharma has invested more than 100 million euros into our projects. And as I mentioned earlier, also, we have now a site in the US and in Israel where we're doing similar things.
Yeah. That sounds, I mean, even just thinking about the application project, that process, that's a huge undertaking to do that, but clearly something that's been successful when you've grown. So maybe you could give us a couple of examples of some of the technologies, products that have come out of this.
Yeah. So most of the projects we are running, I would summarize, is exploring deep disease biology, human disease biology, and finding novel targets, so novel ways how to address very complex diseases in a new way. So many of our teams are working with what we call organotypic in vitro models. So human gut in a dish, human brain in a dish, human knee in a dish, human lung in a dish. So, and then we're looking at these very complex interactions between human cells and how in disease this can be influenced in a way to turn them back to the healthy situation. Many of these projects are in the field of oncology, so cancer research. Quite a few are in the field of immunology, so autoimmune diseases, for example. We've run quite a few projects in neurosciences, in the field of psychiatric disorders, schizophrenia or depression. And also some of the teams are developing platforms and sensors. For example, one team we're having at the moment is answering the question, how can we measure the pharmacology in the brain of a freely moving mouse over a long period? So
yeah, lots and lots of different things going on. So your role in all of this company and everything that's going on is you're the managing director. Is that the right title? Yes. Yeah. So for anybody who hasn't kind of worked in that sort of situation before, what does a managing director do? Day to day? Yeah, what does that entail?
Well, I'm the guardian of everybody's time and making sure everybody can spend their time as creatively as possible. So as a managing director, you can imagine in such a big operation, every day something's not going well and needs to be fixed. And these issues usually end up on my desk. Mm-hmm. So technically, I make sure that everybody else can do their work. And also what I'm doing is developing new business. So, for example, when we moved from Heidelberg to start a new site in Israel or to start a new site in the US or moving into new business models, this is something I'm elaborating at the frontier, discussing with potential future customers and partners. So business development in general. But a managing director, and this is not just very specific for our institute, as a managing director, you need to fix things so that people can do their work.
Yeah, that's a nice way to put it. Yeah. So coming back to think a bit about your journey, you touched a little bit on it earlier, that you did study, you did a PhD, but then it sounds like quite quickly you went into entrepreneurship. Was that like the first thing that you did after your PhD, was set up a company?
Yeah, I started this during my PhD. I was in Heidelberg. I was in a very, very good institute, the Institute of Medical Virology, with an excellent academic mentor, very experienced virologist with hundreds of publications in peer-reviewed journals. And from the beginning, I wanted to become a professor, but then something happened which told me that this might not be the right way. We got a new head of the institute. And then the first thing this young person did was moving my very experienced mentor into a basement laboratory and sort of changing everything and moving people around. And this is something that told me it's probably not a place where I want to stay, because it seemed to be very political, and I don't like wasting time on politics. I rather invest my time into creativity. And so I decided, I told my mentor, it's not for me. I want to do something else. But my mentor said at the time, because I had an offer also coming from a publisher in Heidelberg, because I had just published a book, The Springer Index of Viruses, 1,500 pages on viruses, and they've made me an offer to join. But then my mentor told me, I've educated you for many things, but not to become a publisher. So do something proper with your time. And then if necessary, if you want to leave university, start your own company. And he was involved in a startup in Regensburg, Germany, a diagnostics company. And I said, okay, why not? And I tried it, and I was the managing director and founder of this company. It had a crazy value proposition at the time. It was 1999. And our punchline was 100 tests in 1 drop of blood.
Goodness.
Of course, it didn't work. And later on, other companies, even the founders, went to jail. I didn't.
Goodness me.
I might have heard of Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos in the US.
Yes.
It was a big scam with the exact same value proposition, but of course, much more money.
Right. Okay. Yes.
It worked, but I learned a lot. So.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to ask about. It must have been a massive learning experience to come, just straight from PhD into starting a company. And, they're, from all the people I've spoken to who've done similar things, they're very different worlds. So what sorts of things did you learn from that first experience?
So first of all, in your currency in the university is publications. And once you're in a startup, cash flow is the most important thing you need to deal with. So understanding the basics of finance, of accounting, of legal, because you have to sign agreements and you need advisors and partners not to make all of those mistakes. And so I think these two things were the most important things to learn quickly is basics in law and basics in accounting and finance. And then after the first startup, learning by doing, everything went well. But I learned it the hard way because I didn't have really a very experienced mentor on my side. Did all the mistakes.
Yes. Oh, well, I mean, I think, though, that's the time you want to be making the mistakes, though, isn't it? When you're just starting out, stakes are lower, it's not going to be the end of the world if things don't work out. Yeah.
Well, at the time it was tough. Failing with your first startup and having everybody saying to you, well, we told you, stay at university and become a professor. And I said, I tried and failed.
And what was it that made you want to keep going, even though that first business didn't work out?
I liked many aspects of it. And I thought after having made all those mistakes, you probably don't make them again. And probably next time is going to be better. And that's exactly what happened. The next time was much better. And then the next one was even better. And now I'm running my own institute. So,
So is this your third or fourth?
So if you only count the ones where I was the managing director, because I was investor and co-founder of quite a few startups, also being the managing director, the first one was the diagnostics company. The second one was Cytonet in Heidelberg. That was a cell therapy company. Third one was a stem cell institute, HiStem, Heidelberg Institute for Stem Cell Technology and Experimental Medicine. Then regional development company, BioRN, in which I was coordinating the local biomedical research cluster with a very large grant from the federal government in Germany. This I did for 8 years, and then my own institute, Biomedics. So that's more or less the journey.
Yeah. Oh, goodness me. And so along that journey, I am sure that there have been a few things along the way that you're really proud of. Maybe you could give us a couple of examples.
That's a good question. Of course, my personal pride, or let's call it satisfaction from what I'm doing, is seeing younger talented people who embrace the value concept we are teaching and bringing that to the next generation. So at Biomedics, for example, we have several hundred alumni by now, also many hundreds who have participated in our boot camps. And what we always teach is our 3 core values, and this is teaching values and helping the next generation to be a nicer and better researcher, human being, and creating impact. That's the best thing you can do as a scientist and as a human being. So creating this type of impact by teaching values, I think that's what I'm most proud of, because this group of former Biomedics fellows is like a global family. So people are still, despite the fact that they've left our institute, they get to positions in academia and industry, and they're still connected to us. We have once in a while a joint celebration, like our 10-year anniversary last year, where they all came and we celebrated together. And they're helping each other and teaching the same to their peers. So that I'm most proud of. And also the fact that Biomedics is my first startup. It's not a startup anymore, but it was a startup which I was able to start without external investment. I'm still the owner of the institute. There's no venture capital, no public money involved, which gives us a long-term perspective. Because if you cannot start without external funding, venture capital, for example, in startups, you have to return the money at a multiple at some point. So you need to work on something that has a natural end, which is the exit. I wanted to build something that surpasses my lifetime and is not dependent on making money for investors. And this could only work in an organic way. And in order to do this, you need to get to a certain age and get to a certain point that you're able to do this. And this I'm most proud of.
Yeah, that does definitely sound like something to be proud of, to get something off the ground like you've done with the scale that you're talking about without bringing in external investment. So is it all about the kind of sponsorship that you get from the pharmaceutical companies, or that's rather than government funding or that sort of thing?
So there's no government funding involved. There is government co-financing in Israel, because in Israel, that's the main difference. So if you win a boot camp in Heidelberg or in New Haven, you become a full-time employee of our institute, and you get something that looks like a research grant, which comes from big pharma. If you win a boot camp in Israel, you become the first employee and shareholder of your own startup, and the money is provided investment. But it's done in a way where the Israeli government is co-investing into those startups. So this is the only place where we receive government funding, is the co-investments in Israel. In Heidelberg, everything is driven by revenues. And we had these revenues from the beginning coming from our pharmaceutical partners.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds a really interesting model and quite different to anything that I've heard other people talk about. I'm not an expert in this area, but yeah, to me that sounds like quite a different model, and obviously working for you, so that's great.
Yeah.
So with all the things that you've been through, you've talked about the reasons you left academia, the first company that didn't go to plan. There have no doubt been many challenges along the way. If you had a magic wand and you could change anything about the world that you work in to make it better, easier, what would it be?
So it's really unlimited. So I mean,
basically, if money and time were not
matter at all,
not would matter, what would you do?
This is super big. I would not wish for anything which is specifically connected to my startups or my companies. What bothers me most is the fact that talent is distributed evenly across the globe, but the ability to develop the talent is not. And especially in the current times, things are getting worse and people start killing each other again, and where there's wars out there. If I had a magic wand, I would generate a global system that gives basic scientific education to all children. Because I'm a firm believer that once you are sufficiently educated, the concept of war becomes obsolete. Because it's in wartime and in wars, everyone loses. And there's so many more things how we could spend our creativity and the talent we're generating worldwide. And if I could change this, I would give everyone a proper scientific education.
That sounds like both a fantastic, tangible thing, but also with an amazing goal behind it, overarching goal. And that's interesting. Yeah, I haven't thought about the connection between education and war, but I'm sure there must be.
The concept of war doesn't make sense from an educated. No. It's something where everyone can gain much more by collaborating and helping each other than by killing each other. Yeah. And it's usually not very well educated people who are also, let's say, misguided by all the fake news that are being spread at the moment, because the critical perspective is lacking, the broad view is lacking, and also the respect for other cultures, other beliefs, the diversity of humanity is lacking. When our kids were young, we had a rule that several times a year we would travel to a place on the planet, and the kids could choose where this was. The only rule was they needed to agree on the place. So we visited quite a few places in the world, and we wouldn't go to these fancy luxury hotels. We would go to the place where the local people are, eat the local food, talk to local people, and in order to give to this next generation sort of this respect and the awareness of diversity of humanity and the values that are connected to it. And many kids are not brought up that way. They do not see people from other cultures, other beliefs, other genders, other religions. And this is why it makes it very easy to polarize societies into very simple constructs of seeing society. And the wars are the result of what we're seeing.
Yeah, there certainly is some very worrying divisions at the moment, isn't there? So yeah, that would be an absolutely amazing use of the magic wand if only it were real. Yes. Oh, well, I wonder if, given the journey that you've gone on, if there's anybody listening to this podcast who's thinking that they might want to do something similar to what you've done, what advice would you give them?
That's a very good question. I found out quite late that the biggest value as a young entrepreneur or as a young, very, very early on in your career, the biggest value is having mentors who have done it before so that you don't repeat all the mistakes over and over again. As one of my mentors always says, it's good to learn from your mistakes, but it's even better to learn from other people's mistakes so that you over and over again. So if I had a piece of advice for early career people who want to do something big and something new, find mentors and who will help you not to make all those mistakes and not to make really painful decisions. There's a much more cost-efficient way to learn about startups than running against a wall with your first startup. That's the most expensive way for society and also for yourself, how you can learn. Much better ways.
Does it feel like, I love the image there, running against a wall? Do you feel like that's what you did with your first startup?
And looking at it from today's perspective, what I was trying to achieve as a product was impossible at the time. The people I chose as co-shareholders are people who I would today not really start a company with. So I made all the mistakes, and there was no chance from the beginning, from the perspective of a more experienced person, that this could have succeeded. No way.
Yeah. And do you have any advice for people on how to find mentors? Because I think it is something that comes up a lot, but then people go, but where are they? How do I do it?
Well, it's serendipity. You need to be ready and not too shy. You need to be a good networker. So how I found my mentors was always by serendipity. I'll just give you an example. Ashok Rao, who's still my mentor, next in a couple of weeks is his 75th birthday. Very successful entrepreneur based in Houston, Texas. And I was opening, this was in the early 2000s, we were opening an entrepreneurship chapter with friends of an entrepreneurship society in Leuven, Belgium. And he was the chairman of the global society called TIE, the Indus Entrepreneurs. And he came as a keynote speaker for the opening. And I have not met him before, very successful person. And he gave a talk that really inspired me. And I managed to get close to him when we were moving from one lecture hall to the other lecture hall. And then I said, I really enjoyed your presentation, and this is what I learned from it. And by the way, your shoelace is broken. His shoelace was broken. So I ran into a shoemaker shop and bought him a shoelace. And this is a story he's still telling today. We became very close friends, and I was always sort of asking him whenever I had to make a big decision. We would sit together, have a nice drink and discuss, and he would give me advice. And of course, I would listen to that advice.
That sounds like that's both a great story, but also a fantastic person to have in your life and as a guide throughout what you've done. And I'm sure contributed to the success and how you got to where you are today.
Yes.
Fantastic. Oh, well, great advice. And yeah, thank you so much for sharing your story. I think we should think about wrapping up our conversation. If people would like to reach out to you, find out more about the company, where's the best place to go?
LinkedIn is the place to connect for everyone who wants to develop their career and find mentors and communicate. So anyone can address me via LinkedIn, send me an email, and I will respond always. And otherwise, my contact details are public, so that you would find them on our website, bio.mx. And it was a great pleasure being on your program, dear Sarah.
You're very welcome. Thank you. We'll get those contact details, put them all in the show notes. And yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to come along and have a chat. It's been really interesting. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks for listening to Research Adjacent. If you're listening in a podcast app, please check you're subscribed and then use the links in the episode description to find full show notes and to follow the podcast on LinkedIn or Instagram. You can also find all the links and other episodes at www.researchadjacent.com. Research Adjacent is presented and produced by Sarah McCluskey, and the theme music is by Lemon Music Studios on Pixabay. And you, yes you, get a big gold star for listening right to the end. See you next time.